As Ukraine fights for its survival, it is determined to retake territories occupied by the Russians during the past year. And to do that, it needs more and more Western weapons. Here in Germany, the government recently approved supplying Ukraine with modern Leopard 2 battle tanks after long deliberations. Now attention is moving to jet fighters, which are next on Ukraine's wish list. But this is turning into a heated debate already. We got a chance to speak to Ukraine's ambassador here in Berlin and ask him what exactly it is that Kyiv needs and who it wants to get it from. Oleksii Makeiev, thank you very much for joining DW. Let's start by talking about jet fighters. Ukraine is now moving this debate very quickly onto the need for jet fighters. Why are jets so important to Ukraine?
Well, jets are important because it is a part of our efforts to get Russian rockets down, because, you know, this is the most dangerous thing we unfortunately have to face every day. Russian launches a lot of missiles towards Ukrainian cities, towards infrastructure. And the jets are the part of our air defense efforts.
Now, of course, you're very focused on the German debate, being the Ukrainian ambassador here in Berlin. But Olaf Scholz, the Chancellor here, is already positioning himself as very skeptical of sending fighter jets to Ukraine. He said that this debate is strange, that it seems to be turning into a bidding war that's being driven by domestic political agendas and by various people. What do you say to that?
Well, we've been very consistent in talking to different international partners and looking what kind of equipment we can get from them. And my priorities as ambassador here from the very beginning were our armored vehicles, main battle tanks, and air defense systems and artillery units. And we're progressing very good on all four priorities. And we will continue talking to our German partners mainly on those four priorities. But of course, the situation in the field might request different equipment. But nowadays, my priorities, as I said, are air defense systems, main battle tanks, armored vehicles, and artillery and ammunition.
Okay, so just to be clear what you're saying there, so you representing the Ukraine government are saying that you don't even really need jet fighters from Germany? Is that what you're saying?
We don't need submarines and cruisers and other UFOs from Germany.
But what about fighter jets?
We didn't put any request to Germany about fighter jets yet.
Okay, so that request could yet come?
It would depend on the situation on the battlefield, and once again, if I get from our military guys such a request, we will be working with our partners, but once again, behind closed doors and in a trustworthy environment.
I mean, Olaf Scholz was criticized very heavily here in Germany and also around the West for what was seen as real hesitation over the tanks, which Germany did now then finally agree to supply and to allow other countries to supply these German tanks. Volodymyr Zelensky, your president, said when addressing the World Economic Forum in Davos earlier in the year, he said that the time that the free world uses to think is used by the terrorist state to kill. Do you see these deliberations that take so long in Germany, is that really putting Ukraine at risk?
Well, you know, we will face 1 year anniversary of the Russian large-scale invasion in Ukraine. And when talking to our partners and friends, we hope that they would realize that actually Ukraine is fighting for lives, for existence and independence. And every day we discussing and debating here internally or negotiating the rules of engagement with the partners, Ukrainian soldiers and Ukrainian civilians die. And that's why it is that important that this discussion is being held promptly and that we get supplies of weapons and munitions as soon as possible. Every day of procrastination costs lives of Ukrainian soldiers and civilians.
Ukraine's goal is this year very much going to be focused on regaining territory occupied by the Russian side. We've seen it had significant successes last year already in Kherson and Kyiv. It wants to make progress in the Donbass. There's also the big issue that is looming in the debate about Crimea. Explain why Ukraine wants to take back Crimea.
Because Crimea is occupied territory, occupied by the Russian Federation. And what is important, we're talking not about territories only. We're talking about reestablishing Ukraine's sovereignty in internationally recognized border. But what is most important is to liberate our people in the occupied territory. And we know how bad is the situation there under Russian occupation. And we have seen the pictures from the liberated Buchas and Iziums and Kherson. So many Ukrainian compatriots are still in the captivity of the Russian occupation regime in the east, south of Ukraine and in the occupied Crimea. And unfortunately, we will discover atrocities of the Russian occupational forces when we liberate those territories and when we free our people. So it is for us important that we stop Russian aggression in driving Russians back from all the occupied territories, including Crimea.
And do you think it's realistic to be able to take back Crimea? I mean, this has huge importance to Vladimir Putin. There's a Russian military naval base there.
I don't think we need to be concerned about what is important for Vladimir Putin personally or for Russians and Kremlin. Russia committed an act of aggression back in 2014, and we have seen that the world tried to influence Putin with sanctions, with limitation of his international activities, with isolation of Russia, but it didn't work. And Putin went further and started a large-scale war in Europe in 21st century. So it is in our interest and in the interest of all our international partners to stop this war of attrition, war of aggression by Russia and help Ukraine win this war.
And I just want to follow up about Crimea, because of course internationally and legally you're absolutely right. I mean, hardly any country has recognized Russian control of Crimea. And yet there are concerns in Western capitals that an attempt to retake Crimea could lead to dangerous escalation, perhaps the use of nuclear weapons. Do you understand those concerns?
We understand concerns, and we are in deep dialogue and conversation with our partners on planning and explaining what are our next steps. And we have a complete support of all international partners, and everybody knows that this is Ukraine which defines when to stop this war. And my president and the armed forces of Ukraine and the people of Ukraine have no other option as to liberate Ukrainian territory completely and drive Russian forces back to Russia out of southern and eastern Ukraine and Crimea.
President Zelensky has been presenting a 10-point plan for ending the war. A key point among those 10 points is the call for security guarantees for Ukraine. Could you explain what is he thinking of there? What kind of guarantees does Ukraine want? And what is the role, say, for the United States in such a guarantee? What is the role for big, important European countries such as Germany there?
There are several options on the table, and 10 10 steps peace plan of the President Zelensky is now widely discussed with all the international partners, and we have full support from Germany and from the United States about it. And indeed, we have seen that all the agreements that have been signed with Russia, like our big treaty with the Russian Federation, where Russia committed to recognize Ukrainian independence and territorial integrity, they've broken those treaties. The same happened with the Minsk agreements, and Russia didn't want to implement it from the very beginning. So now it is a call to the international community to make sure that no war can ever be started from Russian Federation after we together win this war against Russia.
But could we then like drill down on these guarantees that you see would prevent such a war from reoccurring? What would you like the United States to guarantee? What would you like Germany to guarantee?
Well, security guarantees is something that we thought we got from the Budapest Memorandum back in 1994, but unfortunately it was not guarantees but security assurances, and we figured out that unfortunately Russia broke the Budapest Memorandum, and we didn't get full security support from the United States and the United Kingdom, other nuclear nations. It was a bad signal to all the countries in the world that realized that actually only nuclear weapon can save them from an attack of such an aggressor. This is why we will want to launch this discussion. I have no ready-made suggestion to you how it might look like. One of the ideas was presented by our president earlier last year on the so-called Security Compact, and this is under discussion now in all the capitals. What is important that the whole world make sure that those guarantees would follow up with concrete instruments how to make sure that Russia would not break it.
Oleksii Makeiev, thank you very much for speaking to DW today.
Thank you.